excited to be with all of you here today. Jason and I are here. Sorry, it looks like there's a little lag there. Jason and I are planning to share leadership notes, more like battle scars from our leadership journeys on the topic of how can leaders thrive and survive in 2020 and beyond, with a bold and an underline on 2020. I mean, what a year it's been, and I know we've had some great sessions today talking about 2020. One mantra I share with my team, in sort of a half-humor way, is look at it this way: what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. So that's my mantra to instill positivity in my team. Jason, what are some of the successful tactics that you and your leaders at GitHub have found work to survive in the world that we're in?
So I think the easiest thing to start out any of those conversations with is it's not normal. It's not what we should have expected. It's not what any of us did. And plans have to change and expectations have to adjust, and everyone has to kind of roll with it. And rolling with it is different for everybody, because if you're a single person living at home or a family of 5 living in a two-room bedroom apartment in San Francisco, they're very different situations, and you have to adjust on the fly to those things. And obviously, no one expected any of this. No one's really prepared for it. So we all kind of have to get together and really adjust ourselves with each other at the same time and alone.
Yeah, it definitely is. It's a crazy world, and it has introduced some interesting challenges around managing remote and distributed teams, right? What are some of the strategies that you've used, to be able to be successful as leaders in this distributed workforce environment?
So one of the things with GitHub is that we are actually quite lucky in that we have been distributed for some time. In fact, since GitHub started, about 70% of the workforce had always been distributed. I myself have never lived in San Francisco. I ran GitHub engineering and product while I was living in Victoria, British Columbia. With Heroku, I'd been remote as well. And we had constructed GitHub from the start that way to be distributed. And the simple, easiest way to describe how you handle being distributed is you have to over-communicate. And this is not a singular person's responsibility. This is everybody's responsibility. This is the CEO's responsibility to continue to communicate the mission and vision and purpose of the company. It is the engineering manager's responsibility to communicate to their employees about what is happening, what we're trying to work on, expectations for them, and then the employees to communicate back what is happening in their world, what is going on with their work, what is going on with their project, what is going on with them. And it's just over-communicating.
So true. One of the interesting things that I'm seeing as a trend in the industry, with Square as well as a lot of companies of our type, which are so human-centered in their nature, is the focus on diversity. Well, for one, I have been a huge proponent of gender diversity, more for up-leveling women in the workforce, especially in senior leadership positions. But what 2020 also brought about is, activities like Black Lives Matter, the social challenges that are out there. And so what I see happening is, companies are shifting to embrace and actually get in a lot of diverse workforce, diversity in gender, racial diversity, ethnic diversity, diversity in sexual orientation. And what that means for us as leaders is the ability to get such people into the workforce, the ability to assimilate them into the workforce and form a real cohesive team, and to be able to successfully deliver and execute with a diverse team. I mean, I see Square as well as companies like our type actually a lot of adopting the Rooney rule. Essentially, with what that means is, you need to have interviewed at least one underrepresented minority candidate before you're able to make offers for senior positions, and at times a lot of other different type of positions. So it is a positive change in the world, and I feel like as leaders, we need to be developing that muscle to be able to embrace, a distributed as well as a diverse workforce. And so while, remote teams, diversity are interesting challenges in 2020, there are some evergreen leadership things, right? I mean, no matter whether you're leading the team in the 2010s or 30s, some leadership skills are, here to stay. Jason, what's been your experience about some of the core leadership skills that you feel are fundamental to engineering and product leaders of today?
Well, I think that the fundamental purpose of leadership is to help achieve something via people and help people achieve something. It's a shared mission objective. And the simple truth of leadership is that if you're really good at your job, you're achieving something that otherwise wouldn't exist or have been done via people and with people. And those, if you think about it at its simplest as that, then nothing really is new or surprising. As you mentioned, 10 years ago, 10 years from now, 100 years ago, 100 years from now. Some of the technology will look different, but people don't change that fast. So when you think about it that way, lessons learned from thousands of years ago will still apply. The environment, the culture, things might be different, but you can still apply lessons to it. And for when I think about this on a regular basis, what I think about is how are you actively manifesting something into the world via yourself and with others. And again, it comes down for me, it's very, very simple. Communicate. You communicate what you're trying to do, why you're trying to do it, who you're trying to do it for, and upon which time horizon you're trying to achieve those things. You're laying down essentially what all the objectives are, and then in a classic sense, you're trying to inspire people to go achieve those objectives with you. So if you're a good leader and you're a talent magnet, people will be drawn to you because they want to be around you and the energy you bring with your team, and they also want to see that shared mission. So as an example, you're over at Square, I'm over at GitHub. I'm a very developer-oriented person. You run the head of developer platform. We share a lot of the same enthusiasms in the world. I know that I'm not going to go to certain industries or certain companies. I just don't have that sort of passion for whatever they tend to do. So you have your own set, and everyone watching this will have a certain set of things or companies or industries they don't want to work for, but many that they do. You need to find your group of people and then help them achieve something in that.
Yeah, so true. I think connecting to the mission and the vision and feeling for it from your heart is really the passion that brings the best in all of us leaders. You mentioned, Jason, earlier about communication being so fundamental. One of the personality traits that I've seen sort of more valued, more I guess in recent years, is the ability to be empathetic. And I call this sort of 360 degrees of empathy. It's empathetic towards your team, it's having empathetic towards your customers, towards your vendors, towards your boss, right? Towards your developers, towards everyone. And I feel that this personality trait in leaders is so crucial now, and I feel like that's here to stay. Because, end of the day, when we think of leaders, I see leaders as people who are sort of elected or sometimes self-selected into that role. And it being such a people-centric role, it means to be able to connect to everyone around you, the 360 degrees around you. Got to have that personality trait of being empathetic and being able to express empathy in a way that you can connect with the people ecosystem around you. So that I'd highlight as an interesting one. The one thing I find, in sort of the many leaders I see around is there's empathy and then there is being authoritative. We as leaders also need to be authoritative. There's a certain, decision-making that comes into play in sort of being the captain of your ship. And so I find leaders find that balance difficult in being empathetic as well as authoritative at the same time. And I feel like that fine balance in achieving it, is something that, leaders will sort of need to get better at as we go along. Jason, if you had a crystal ball and you're in touch with a lot of the industry, you probably do have a crystal ball that way. What would you say would be some of the leadership skills that would be sort of valued 5 years down the line?
So I think I find it interesting that you mentioned that just recently, maybe in the last 5 years or so, empathy has kind of risen to the top of traits that people look for in leaders. And I think it has less to do with the skill itself and more to do with people realizing that people are involved with the creation of software or companies, essentially. That's where value is created, it's the people. And what I find is that just like any pendulum swing one way, there's a risk of it going back, but what will happen is it'll likely end up in the middle. And so what I find is that I talk about this quite a bit when I talk about culture, and I talk about the way the companies are formed. And it's very easy to always be one thing, whether or not you are a hard driving person. I'm I'm a get shit done type of person, or I'm a super empathetic person. Neither one of those in isolation is actually a valuable skill. But the combination of somebody who has empathy and people respond to, but also is able to accomplish in amazing things as a leader, that is what we all should aspire to, and that will be the supreme value that someone has in the future. We've gone to the point where culture has meant beanbags or ping pong tables or drinks in the fridge, and that's not what it's about. Culture is, again, a shared mission and people being inspired by you and the company and all of the objectives you're trying to set out. So when you can get those two things together and you can achieve amazing things, but do it with people in a way that they totally resonates with them, that's what's going to be valuable. And that is not well understood, I don't believe, nor is it actually well taught and practiced. It is actually a very difficult leadership thing. In fact, most of the people I find are on one end of the spectrum, and they will ultimately fail.
Yeah, so well said. You're right. In my leadership experience and intense interviewing of always finding a needle in a haystack, the best perfect leader. That's something I come across quite a lot, which is you have leaders who are good in A, B, and C, but just so not good in the other end of the spectrum. And sort of being a balance somewhere in between, and having that right balance is really, in some sense, makes a perfect leader.
The way I've described this to some folks is that you could be the most achieving person, and your team could achieve very, very great short-term objectives by burning people out. But that's actually a long-term failure. Or you could be the most empathetic or human-centric or very warm and fuzzy person but never achieve anything. But that's an equally devastating failure. The point is you've got to marry the two of those together and be able to do that. Again, that's not something that I've seen too often in the industry, particularly VC-backed companies.
Yeah. I hear what you mean. Jason, now I'm going to ask you a very different question. If you had a time machine and you could go back in time, let's say a decade back, right? What would you tell your younger self, Jason?
Wow, okay, so that's a very good question. I love those types of questions. I think that if I were to go back, this is a personal 10-year back time machine. They'll do a general one, but the personal one would be to trust your instincts a little bit more. I'm the type of person that if I'm having a discussion with someone and they are very emphatic about a point, I will be very introspective and assume I'm wrong and I'm missing something, and I need to go deeper into my own bag of tricks to figure out why I'm missing something. And one of the things I've learned, I'm 43 years old at this point. I've been doing this for quite some time. In that I tell people that I think being right in retrospect is one of the worst feelings in the world. And in many cases, that has been proven out in my career that I was right in retrospect, but I didn't have the ability in the moment to push through somebody else's overconfidence yet undereducated opinion. So that's a very personal one. Now, generally speaking, what I would hope I could tell the industry is that most of the people who have those strong opinions likely are not worth listening to.
Wow, that's so interesting. The ability to be able to have sort of more confidence in your own self and actually lead your own sort of campus or believe you're in your compass and taking you where next is so powerful. What I would do if I had if I had a time machine, I would go 2 decades back. And this is maybe a woman, giving out her age or whatever, but I would actually go back to 2 decades and change how I viewed what I then saw was a career ladder. I mean, to me, a career ladder was literally a career ladder. It was a step by step to get up there. Starting in software development as a software developer, getting to be a technical leader, a first line manager, second line manager, director, and so on. And I literally viewed it as the ladder. Now, what experience and gray hair has taught me is that it is not really a ladder, it is actually a lattice. There is lots of room to move around and actually make sort of big jumps, which are not just step jumps. Because the reality is when you're going up the ladder, as a leader, really what you're doing is operating at the next level. And you don't necessarily need to constrain yourself to operate one level high. You could operate many levels higher, right? And those are probably the people you mentioned, Jason, who kind of become know-it-all or be-it-all type of people, right? And so to me, this notion of it is not a career ladder, it's a career lattice. And in taking big, bold risks, making big, bold jumps to get you there is something that I do differently.
Well, I think that is a great point. And one of the things that, again, going back to me personally, I would love to be able to go back and say, everyone is making it up to some degree. I joke about this as an adult. Wait a second. When am I allowed to be an adult? When am I supposed to feel like I'm an adult? Wait a second. I already have 3 kids. I've been paying taxes for years. I don't understand this anymore. Well, it's the same thing with leadership. I think everyone doesn't realize that Satya over at Microsoft, who's been doing a fantastic job with Microsoft, literally wakes up anxious at times. He's like, I'm messing this up. I messed that up. I don't know what I'm doing. And I think everyone has that. You just have to realize that about individuals. I wish I knew that earlier.
Yeah, totally. I think, it's also called imposter syndrome. There's a term for that, which is called imposter syndrome, which is really the belief in yourself, or rather not having the belief in ourselves actually kind of holds ourselves back. And so speaking of career ladder, Jason, for our leaders who are listeners here today, for the folks who are looking to get into sort of director and VP roles, let's say a couple years down the line, what would you advise them?
Well, so I think if we go back to that point about empathy and also getting stuff done and running teams, but also achieving objectives, I don't believe there's any real success in the industry unless you achieve something. And you have to look in your domain to achieve something. And you have to have people who will champion it. Obviously, the very easiest and first place you should look are people who report to you. You have a responsibility to those people. And you also have your boss to understand how to communicate with and understand how to challenge as well. So if you want to make it to director, you should understand how to motivate your team, but also direct your team at times and tell them, okay, I understand your side on that too, I understand your position. We also need to achieve this. So help me understand, or help us all understand how we're going to do that. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, if you're not achieving those things, it's unlikely you're going to have that career success that you want. Even if you ephemerally get it in a title at one point, you likely won't have the career success. So you have to learn how to do that. And the earlier you learn how to do that, the better. I would also say that the job of manager, director, and VP are dramatically different. Dramatically different. And people think of it as manager, director, VP, and director is manager plus plus, all that sort of thing. I don't look at them that way. I look at director as actually VP minus minus. And if you want to do that, if you want to understand the differences in those positions, VP, you likely have a $100 million plus budget, and you're responsible for caring for a $100 million plus revenue line, and your time horizons for mistakes and good decisions is years. So understand that the impact of your decisions and your motivations and your output could be, you won't know if you're really right for years from that point forward. So really become introspective. Really be honest with yourself about what you're good at, what you can improve, and ruthlessly improve on those things. And what you are great at, double down on, triple down. But don't do the classic, I'm great at one thing, therefore I'll ignore the other. No, don't do that. You actually do need to get better at things that you're weak at. But the things that you are great at, make them your superpower as well.
Yeah, such amazing words. I mean, just like you said, I mean, I've seen a lot of people who get hired into these senior roles, and then also very soon get fired out of these roles for not delivering. And I think while the EQ and emotional intelligence and all that good stuff does get you there, it is results that matter at the end of the day. I also find one thing. Sorry, but I also find one thing interesting, which is I found people in these senior leadership positions be successful if they are able to connect what they are doing with the overall organization's mission, vision, purpose. So achieving the larger good of the organization, creating a dent for your company through your bit kind of being a piece of the puzzle of the larger company is, I feel, so important for people in these senior leadership positions to be able to crack and be good at to be successful in what they're doing.
I could not agree with you more on that one. One of the major feelings I think of most senior leaders in the organization is that for whatever reason, particularly on the more experienced side of the fence, they're going to fall into this camp of, I should not have to repeat myself, and I shouldn't have to be able to connect what we're talking about to somebody else. I believe that's a failing of our industry. We always, everybody in every position should be constantly trying to connect mission and vision to long-term strategy to what we're doing every day. And this is actually one of the core skills of leadership, is to help translate some of those things for people. And as you go up and down that lattice and ladder that we talked about earlier, it changes the degree to which you have to do that translation layer, but you always have to do that translation.
Yeah, so true. Since we are on the topic of ladder, here's another question for you, Jason. What does it take to become the CTO of GitHub?
Oh, I would say that the CTO of GitHub is a unique position, but I would say overall, and specific to GitHub, it's luck. It's being in the right place at the right time, having the right experiences, developer orientation. But general CTO at a large tech company these days, I'd say that there's a couple of skills that you need. One is obviously you need the human skills, you need the people skills, and you do have to be able to inspire people and have them follow you and want to follow you and things of that nature. I also think that the technical track is weirdly the hardest track to navigate these days. You likely run the largest organization in the entire company. You likely do not make some of the strategic decisions, and when you do, you have to balance a lot of different needs. So you have to learn how to say no. You have to learn how to balance tech debt or long-term strategic mission and vision with short-term issues. You have scaling issues. You do have to juggle a lot more than most people, including the CTO. And so I find that in that role, CTO at an organization about the size of Square or GitHub, it likely is probably one of the most generalist roles with the T-shape in scaling organizations and scaling tech at the same time. And I'll go back and say that one more time because I think it's important, is that the CTO or the head of engineering in most of these organizations is likely one of the hardest organizations to run and the most difficult role to play.
Plus 100, you have a hard job there, as a CTO of GitHub. Well, we got just 5 more minutes, and I want to make sure we leave time for Q&A. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit, get in the Q&A section. And folks, I'm going to read some of the key questions I see coming in here. There's one question which says, what's the biggest threats to technology in the current environment?
If the current environment you mean global pandemic, I would say that I just generally think that the biggest threats to technology are going to be overregulation of certain things, but also specific compliance things that are going to pop up. And I don't think that that's a bad thing. I think that we do need more regulation in some industries, but I think compliance is going to be harder to navigate. I think that there will be a rise of chief compliance officers who will have to navigate to handle all of those different issues. And then I also think my general feeling is that technology, no matter what we say about getting easier to create companies and write software, has gotten harder and more complex and more brittle. And I think you see that all the time. While Kubernetes, as an example, is a fantastic technology, it has actually made many things harder to do. And you need more specialists in those areas to navigate that, plus more technology around it. So I think, interestingly, the biggest threat to technology in general is us bifurcating too much to a degree.
Yeah, totally couldn't agree with you more. We have time for one more question, and here's a question about, could you give examples of how you best walk the line between being authoritative and empathetic? I can share how I see this playing out. I think empathy is a personality trait, and I feel like it's almost vitally got to connect with your team. At the same time, respect for authority comes after you've established trust with your team, and they actually trust you to make the right decisions for the organizations, for their benefit as well as the organization's benefit. So I think it really comes down to actually being able to establish that trust, which then is the grounds for which to you to be authoritative, and you can do it in a way in which you're empathetic towards their personal situation, but yet making them realize of the importance of this decision, assuming there is some misalignment on the decision itself. And that's sort of the way, really, I think the grounds to me of being empathetic and authoritative is the grounds of having trust, and again, those human relations, and then essentially navigating from there. Cool. We just got a couple more minutes left. Jason, there's lots of questions coming. Sorry, folks can't get to all of these questions at this time. Loving the excitement and engagement here. Jason, in closing, what would you like to say to our fantastic group of leaders here?
I think that my closing for everyone here would be to do the deep introspection on yourself. Ask what, if you could fast forward 5 years, not career, not anything about monetary, but what do you think your superpower is and your glaring weakness that you want to work on? And how do you augment that superpower so it radiates from the moon? You can see it from the moon for you. And then also, how do you shore up the things that you do have gaps on? We all do. And if we're honest and very introspective with ourselves, we have them. And how do you shore them up? And how do you make your superpower shine?
Yeah, Jason, you almost stole my closing line. I was actually about to share the same. To me, the key behavior trait that sets great leaders apart from the others is the ability to what we call have a growth mindset, which essentially means exactly what Jason said, to know your strengths, to write on your strengths, but at the same time be super humble and acknowledging of your areas of development and continue to hone those areas of development. I can say all of you who've made the time out of your busy work lives to show up here today, definitely have a growth mindset. You're investing in your learning, you're investing in growing, and that to me is the number one behavior trait that is required for leaders to thrive for 2020 and beyond. So thank you all for being with us here today. Stay safe and stay strong.